What's up, Alex? Thanks so much for joining us.
Will, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
You bet, man. So you tired of talking about this yet? Or I'm sure it's not just professionally, by the way.
I'm ready to see it, that's for sure, yeah.
But, I mean, seriously, not just having to do radio and television hits, even personally. Like, you go to a social gathering, I mean, this has to be the subject of conversation for going on 2 years for you. Are you whipped by it yet?
I mean, a little. I mean, yeah, keep in mind, I walked around with a giant external fixator on my leg for like 9 months. So it was tough. That thing sticks out. It's tough not to talk about it when you go anywhere and you get this thing bolted into your leg. Yeah, I am ready to see this and to kind of put this all out there. You know, we kind of kept it under wraps for so long, especially a lot of my kind of status and where I was at and stuff like that. So it does feel good in a way to kind of air a lot of this and kind of finally put it all out there. So hopefully you won't get quite as many questions, you know?
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing so much with ESPN, with E60, and spending some time with me here to talk about it, because I can only imagine it's got to be a bit of a beating, but nothing like what you've been through, obviously. Alex Smith, Washington Redskins quarterback here on the Will Cain Show. I'm going to start with probably what is a dumb question, but as I was watching the beginning of the piece and reading so much about it, you say in the beginning, to look down and see your leg at unnatural angles was really jarring for you. I'm curious, when you realized how bad the injury was that something that you saw or you felt? Like, which came first? You know what I mean? Sometimes when you hear about catastrophic injuries, you hear like, I didn't even feel it. Was it you knew by your sense of pain right away, or your eyes that told you this is a big deal?
Yeah, both. I'd kind of put it both ways. It was a very unusual feeling. It was not painful at that moment. At the moment when it happened on the tackle, it was a very unfamiliar feeling, something I've never felt before. Tingly. I've said fuzzy. I'm not sure that's a feeling, but that's kind of how I would describe it. Certainly, I felt something down there. Like I said, I didn't hear a break or anything. It wasn't crazy painful, but there was a really unusual feeling in my leg, in my lower leg. And then as I rolled over, immediately to see it, if not aligned, I knew immediately it was broken. Yeah. So
when did the pain come? I'm sure there was a sense of adrenaline at the beginning. Yeah. That's what it was. So
probably about 5-10 minutes later, in my mind, I remember telling them as the doctors and trainers came out, like, oh, it's broken. I remember saying that, clearly I don't think I described the what bones or where. So they air casted me, and took me in, but I think they were still trying to figure out, is it my ankle? Is it my tib fib? Like, what's going on? So in the x-ray room, still in the stadium, like in the tunnel right there, they're x-raying me, but they have to move you around. And really that's when the pain set in and pretty good pain. I mean, I don't think I've ever felt anything like that from a pain scale standpoint, really set in. But you're trying to have you roll over and lay on your side and do all this stuff. And we didn't even know at that point it was a compound fracture, so you're trying to move around and get a good look at it. But it wasn't long after that it set in. That shock kind of wore off.
There's an amazing piece up on ESPN.com that is a sort of journal entry from your wife, along with Stefania Bell, that she talks about that moment going into the tunnel and hearing your screams and saying exactly what you just said, that I've never heard a sound like that from Alex before. It's really a stunning piece. In fact, I read some of it on air earlier. You know what? I'm just going to follow my natural curiosities in talking to you, man. But so when you choose to play football, you choose to take on a lot of risks. I think at this point everybody knows the risks of concussion. Yep. Did you ever really consider something like this, and everything that's been a part of your life for the last 2 years was a risk you were taking on in playing football? No, I never imagined it. For me, I think, like you said, I think especially from a quarterback standpoint, from any football player, especially lately, really the big concerns you always wonder about, certainly anything kind of head or neck are the two big things, right? I mean, it's a contact sport, and obviously there are things you hear about players, and it does happen occasionally that there is a neck injury. Obviously Ryan Shazier coming to mind.
And then from beyond that, really a kind of a head thing at this point. We're learning more about concussions and long-term effects and things like that. So there's still a lot unknown there. And I think as football players, those are the two major things you certainly think about that are on your mind as far as playing. But they're never at the forefront at playing. I think it's hard to play that way. It's hard to play cautious in a sport that's physical. So, but those are risks you're taking. From a joint bone perspective, I think we got great surgeons, and you always kind of think, well, if I break something or I tear something, they'll fix me up and put me back together. Never something from a broken bone perspective. Even when I was on the field, I knew it was broken. I really kind of thought, well, the doctors will put me back together. I'll do the rehab and get back out here. I never imagined it would turn into what it did.
Alex Smith, Washington Redskins quarterback here on the Will Cain Show. And for those that don't know, you can find out tonight on E60 what then ensued after the injury on the field. Alex had a massive infection in his leg, a flesh-eating bacteria, 17 surgeries, many of which included debridement, which is taking away dead skin, dead muscle tissue. Through that process, I know that first week was like one catastrophe on top of another, and then it's been years of rehabilitation. What's been the lowest moment for you?
I think early on was by far the most difficult. Really kind of coming to a lot of that early on was a blur. But then, kind of waking up and your legs, I got this like vacuum seal around it. And the doctors are telling me, really what's left of my leg, and just hard to accept that, hard to accept. Because like I said, my mentality was before the surgery was like, well, I'll get fixed. It was no big deal. They'll put the plates or screws or whatever they got to put in there and fix me up. And so all of a sudden they're like, yeah, you're never going to be the same again, ever. You're going to have physical limitations. We can't tell you what those are. This is the doctor speaking, I'm saying. And, they're telling me that you're never going to be the same. We don't know what you'll be able to do. We don't even know here at this point, depending on your options, what you choose. Like, yeah, your life's going to be forever changed. And so at that point, you're laid up. And then obviously the road thereafter, being in a fixator, I was wheelchair bound for quite a while. And at that point, non-weight bearing with this contraption on my leg. And I spent a long time just wondering about like what I'll ever be able to do, and starting with walking. And, you think about the important things first, certainly with your family and kids and wife and things like that. And then basic things. And, at that point, you're not even daring to dream about ever playing sports or football again, at least not professionally. So, yeah, it's been a progression, but early on was probably the when you're sitting in a wheelchair, stuck on the couch or in bed, and you're just wondering if you're ever going to be able to do the things you took for granted, so.
But help me understand this, Alex Smith here on the Will Cain Show. I know in reading the story that in that first week they gave you options on how to rebuild your lower leg, right? And tell me if I'm mischaracterizing this. It sounds like after all the surgeries and the debridements of losing the dead skin, there wasn't much left between the knee and the ankle. Is that fair? Muscle and
yeah, pretty fair. They're pretty exposed at that point. A lot of that, tonight will come out. They did it. It's hard to put into the words, and I'm thankful. It's nice to have some pictures. They kind of do it justice. But yeah, at that point, I'm left with I've got a broken tibia and fibula. It's completely exposed. I don't have a ton of. I'm missing a bunch of skin and muscle all around it, and running from my knee all the way down to my ankle. It looks pretty gnarly. I can't see it. Like I said at the time, it was all vacuum packed up for me, and they're just telling me. And my options at that point, when all the debridements were done, is either you're faced with an option of amputation and cutting it off, or trying to save it. And there were a couple options that the surgeon was talking about as far as muscle transfers. That would, at that point, he's not guaranteeing success, so that's pretty scary. He starts talking about taking body parts from one part of your body to the other.
Right. And what I'm curious about there is you said you were slowly putting the mental process together of what can I do in this life, right? How much more can I rebuild? But they offered you the opportunity to take your lat. I think that was their first choice, right? Take your lat and essentially make it your new calf. But you said no to that because you said, I got to be able to throw. So it also said, I'm just curious, it sounds to me like you were pretty intent early to get back to the ability to play.
At this point when I was making that decision, this was still really early on in the hospital. I think I was still pretty naive to what was going on. I wasn't conscious for a lot of the really serious stuff there early on in the hospital, and really kind of came to in this state where I'm given these options. It's the surgeons in the room, my wife, and I think at that point I was still in a little bit of disbelief, not believing what they're telling me. Like, how could this be real? I was perfectly fine. In my mind, the last time I remember, I was fine. And all of a sudden now, even though I'd had 8 debridements and it had been almost over a week, like I wasn't awake for any of that. So really, and then I just thought about all the things upper body wise, and they're talking about taking my lat. And I just thought, like, it was such a large area from my knee to my ankle that they had to cover, that I had a ton of exposed bone and just doesn't heal, obviously, if you don't have any blood supply over it. So there were different options. Certainly, the lat scared me a lot that from an upper body perspective. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to weaken another part of my body and to try to save this, and it's not guaranteed. It really did scare me. The quad was an option there as well. It was certainly something that when it did come up, I do remember that sounded a whole lot better to me. It still sounded scary that I'm like, my left leg's going to be, how's that going to be for the rest of my life? And luckily enough, I remember even getting videos at that point of some soldiers that had performed similar surgeries, almost identical, and their outcomes and things they've gone on to be able to do, and a lot of them even going back and serving and touring. So that was encouraging at the time for sure.
And that's what you ended up doing, taking it from your calf. I'm curious, has it rebuilt?
Taking it from my quad on my left leg.
I'm sorry, your quad, right? Yeah. Has it rebuilt where it was taken away, or do you notice that it's lessened on that left side?
So, the doctors and therapists have talked about how the human body is kind of this crazy thing, and it'll learn and adjust, and those other muscles that are there take over and work harder and get bigger. And I don't think it hurt that I had to hop around on my left leg for almost a year. It was the leg that did everything once I could, getting up and down out of a chair, crutches. It was my leg for so long. So I honestly believe my left leg might be stronger than it was before the break. Really? That sounds crazy, but I honestly think it might be true. I've had to rely on it so much through this recovery process that it really has adapted well. I don't have any concerns from a strength and ability standpoint as far as my left leg goes.
And how's your right leg now? How did the transplant take, and how's that calf essentially transplant developed?
Yeah, it's a crazy process. I knew nothing about this, and obviously at this point I'm decently versed in it. But at the beginning, really, really scary. You're in the ICU. It's like I don't know how many hours surgery it was for them to do that. It was really long, and you're in the ICU for a little while, and obviously in the hospital they're keeping an eye on it, and I have to have it elevated the entire time because of this whole blood thing. They've had to hook up, it's veins and arteries and, pretty delicate thing going on down there. So, checking on it, making sure it's okay, that it doesn't die. And that was a process. And then, it evolves into the skin grafts and all this stuff down the line. So, then obviously with the fixator on that throughout that. So, it's doing well. It's still a process. It's still something that I'm rolling on my right leg, and it's crazy to believe even in the trajectory. As far as the plan goes for recovery, I'm still kind of in the middle of it, and I still have a lot to gain. But I'm doing things I wasn't doing 2 months ago. I feel stronger on it. I feel better. I feel quicker than I have since I broke it. So still progressing.
And you plan to play professional football again, right?
I'm trying to push it. Yeah. In my mind, if I can go play quarterback again, I won't really have any limitations. And I guess I spent so long wondering what those were going to be, where it would, what I would be able to do. I just don't see how I can't keep pushing it and find out what I got in the tank still. So I think as I keep going, it keeps kind of fueling me even more. The more I can do, it excites me. So long I wondered what I'd be able to do. So every little thing I do, or I move faster, or jump farther, it makes me feel like I'm getting back to where I was. So excited about it.
Alex Smith, quarterback for the Washington Redskins, here on the Will Cain Show. I have just a couple more things with you, Alex. I was watching you on Scott Van Pelt the other night, and I believe it was Scott you were talking with about that your experience of ups and downs with San Francisco, with Kansas City, sort of almost prepared you for this, I believed you were saying. How is that?
Well, yeah, I think, Scott was asking me just as far as it is a reality. Like, you get hurt, not to say, but it's sports, right? You're not out there on game day, and obviously the game continues, and just like that, you get forgotten quickly. And I was just kind of, for me, that I don't necessarily view that as a bad thing, right? This game is short lived. You enjoy it while you can. You make the most of it, but you move on with your life, obviously, when it's done. I think just having been through some of the ups and downs as a starter and then being replaced, a couple times, I do think preps you for that, and you understand it, right? You appreciate it when you're in it, how much you appreciate being a starting quarterback, being able to play in the NFL, what an opportunity that is, how special it is. But at the same time, right, it's not going to last forever. Nothing does. So enjoy it while you can, and make the most of it. But obviously, it's all a process and always going to be moving.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you about, the management of the Washington Redskins, owner Dan Snyder and Bruce Allen, have developed a popular reputation out there that hasn't been very popular for them. And I know that hasn't been your experience with either of them, specifically through this process for you. Would you tell me about that?
Yeah. Absolutely. I would totally agree with you. Both Dan and Bruce, through the entire thing, have been crazy supportive of me and my family. And I really can't say enough about that. This is obviously something that nobody plans on, wanted, crazy, kind of unprecedented, and really almost unique too, in the sense that I was really new to the club. Obviously traded in the spring. We hadn't even made it a full season. And I think the support and closeness that I felt from the organization, I really think speaks a lot to both of them. Certainly Dan and Tanya and the Snyder family, having gone through this entire thing, having been there through the hospitals, the entire time, the support I felt, I know my family has felt and continues to feel, is something we're really thankful for and grateful for.
All right, Alex Smith, quarterback for the Washington Redskins. It's on E60 tonight, his story on his comeback from this catastrophic injury. Alex, I wish you the best, man. I hope everything, good luck, prayers, blessings, everything goes your way, man. Thanks so much for giving me time today and telling us about it.
Will, thanks, man.